Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the award-winning Cannabis Tech Talks. You're chopping it up with Chuck. I am the editor-in-chief of Cannabis and Tech Today, where we always bring you the best in the biz when it comes to innovation, science, sustainability, and social equity. Today's guest, we are very excited to have today's guest. We have with us one of the most interesting men in the industry, I think. We have Steve DeAngelo. He is a cannabis industry consultant and strategic advisor, as well as the co-founder of Harborside. Andrew, welcome.
Hi, Chuck. Nice to be with you today.
Thank you so much for joining us. You're in Oakland, huh?
I am. Sunny Oakland today. Yes.
Oh, it's so great to have you here because I wasn't kidding when I said that. You've got a really diverse background in the industry, don't you?
Yeah, well, I've been at this some time, 37 years now. Many people are probably familiar with my older brother, Steve, and Steve's 10 years older than I. So we've been at this quite some time now, and it's been a grand adventure.
Yeah. So how far back does this history go with you guys and cannabis? You know, when did it kind of become apparent that this was going to be your guys's, kind of life mission? Was it all the time, or was there like a certain turning point?
Well, my older brother, Steve, tells the story. When he was 13, he took his first taste of cannabis, and he immediately knew from that first experience that cannabis is what he was going to do for the rest of his life. So he had that experience very quickly. I came along 10 years younger than Steve, and luckily I had him to guide me through my first experiences with cannabis. And similar, I also knew cannabis was going to be in my life. I did not know it was going to be my profession when I was a teenager, but I did know it was going to be in my life for the rest of my life. And as it came to pass, cannabis has also been my profession, among other things. I'm sort of a Renaissance man, as you alluded to a moment ago.
Yeah, it's crazy to think back. You know, I was kind of a late bloomer. I didn't try cannabis until I was, after high school. I was like 18 or 19, and my buddies thought it was really funny to get me high. And I never had any idea that I'd be involved with this as a form of work. You know, it was just kind of it was just sort of a recreational thing. And it was something that you build an affinity towards, but there was no way I was going to make a living out of it back then. And then, look at where we are now.
Right. Well, we've come a long way, haven't we? And it's a testament to a lot of hard work by a lot of people for many, many years and decades. So we're all standing on the shoulders of giants, both of us included, and it's a real privilege to be able to do this work. So we have lots of work to do that'll take up certainly the rest of our lifetimes and many generations to come. But the cannabis renaissance is here, and it's a thrilling moment to be a lover of the plant.
It's a great time, man. So tell us just briefly, what was it like, opening it was one of the first dispensaries in the nation, right?
Harborside opened in October of 2006.
Okay.
So 14 years ago. At that time, California was the only legal state, and at that time, California was only medical. And we were one of the first 6 licenses ever issued for a cannabis business. And after a lifetime of activism and being in the cannabis trade, we were thrilled to try to take that opportunity and that trust that the city of Oakland had put in us and create a gold standard retail experience for cannabis and cannabis people, and particularly in those days, patients.
Mm-hmm.
And our vision was unique at that time. Most dispensaries were run by well-intentioned activists who weren't super good at running a business, or they were dispensaries owned by criminal organizations that were sort of using the law as a front for moving a lot of weed out the back door. And we wanted to do something much different than that. Luckily, the world was absolutely ready for that vision when we hit Oakland 14 years ago. And pretty much overnight, we had people coming into our facility and telling us that it was a dream come true to be able to come into a shop where the windows were open, natural light was coming in, there weren't bars on the windows. We were operating as a not-for-profit. We were putting people first. We were donating money to the community. We had free programs if you needed cannabis because you were poor. We had a care package program. We also had a program where we gave people free weed for writing cannabis letters to cannabis prisoners. So that's sort of the genesis of LPP, sort of started there in many respects. And we had to figure out cannabis retail, which had never really been done before. So things like laboratory testing, Harborside pioneered. Things like child-resistant packaging for edibles, Harborside pioneered.
Great idea, by the way. Great idea.
Yeah, I think for edibles, it's a great idea. I'm not sure we need it. It's gone a little too far, of course, overkill. I'm not sure we need them for a joint. I mean, if the tobacco people don't need them, I'm not sure why we need them for a joint. But in any case, sometimes these innovations come can go a little too far and can kind of bite you in the rear end. The same thing happened with taxes. We asked the city of Oakland to increase our taxes early on in 07, 08 because we wanted.
Wait, what?
I know, Chuck, I know.
Tell us about this. You said, hey, tax us a little bit more.
Right, because in those days, we wanted to be considered legitimate by the city, by the community, by other taxpayers and other businesses. And we were just being taxed like any other business. There in the city of Oakland, there's a business license tax that everybody has to pay. And it's a fraction of 1% of your gross that you have to pay. Well, we said, look, we'll pay a little bit more. We're cannabis. You have to regulate us. Your program costs a little bit more. Why don't you, bump it up a 1/4% or 0.5%. Well, of course, they bumped it all the way up to 5%. And then when we legalized for adult use, they bumped it up to 10%. And that made it very difficult for us to have reasonable prices for patients and for customers. To this day, we're struggling to compete with what I call the legacy market. Some people call it the underground market, because the price differential is so great that people who love cannabis and consume a lot of it have a hard time affording it in the legal market and dispensaries like Harborside. So it's a really dynamic, interesting market when you look at the legacy, versus kind of the new industry in California. And, isn't it pretty much common knowledge that the legacy market is bigger than the legal market? 80-20,
quite a bit?
Yeah, about 80-20, maybe 75-25.
Wow.
We might have crawled another 5% in the last 2.5 years. But no, it's a unmitigated disaster, right? Yeah. and this certainly was not the intention of anyone who voted for Prop 64. And we have to fix it. I've been trying to fix it for 2.5 years. A whole bunch of other smart people have been trying to fix it. It's a very hard thing to do, and we haven't succeeded, but we have to keep trying.
Doesn't that happen a lot, Andrew, where, people go and they get something put on the ballot and they get it put through and they're like, yeah, we got this done. And then there's some unintended consequences, or, there's some things like that. Like, that kind of happens, right? And then you got to go back and fix it. You got to strengthen it. You got to do this. It's a process. It's not really a destination, right?
Right. It's called democracy.
Yeah.
And it's messy and it's imperfect and it goes back and forth, but it's a lot better than tyranny. Mm-hmm. Which is certainly more efficient as a decision-making tool. But we all know what happens to tyrants. The harder they come, the harder they fall. We've got a pretty hard one falling right now, I think. And taking a whole bunch of people down with them. So we don't want that, right? So democracy's messy, and we didn't get Prop 64 right, and we had to make a lot of compromises because we lost Prop 19 just a few years prior to 64. So yes, complicated, messy, not perfect, a real pain in the rear end to deal with. Incremental change is frustrating. The political process is frustrating. Sacramento's frustrating. Local politics is frustrating. But that's how change happens. And
Yeah.
that's the work that we have to do. That's why, activism is not something that should be anybody's full-time job. It should be something that we all have a little bucket of activism that we do on a continual basis, because you'll get burned out pretty quick. It's a very difficult process. And we'll see. Maybe we'll have to stick a fix to Prop 64 back on the ballot in 2024. I'm hoping it doesn't get to that point, because that's a hard, arduous, and expensive process. But it may, if we can't get the Democratic Party here in California to cooperate with us a little bit more, I'm afraid it may come to that.
I want to get to that, because that's a great topic. And you're an activist, right? I mean, underneath it all, when it comes down to it, you're an activist for the plant and for the industry, right?
Well, if you want to sell weed and not go to jail, and
Yeah.
you need to be an activist. So I am a reluctant activist. It is not the thing I like doing.
Yeah.
I like selling weed and creating models for integrating cannabis into society and telling stories about cannabis and writing about cannabis. That's the fun stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't do any of those things if, you have to go to jail. So the activism part is just a prerequisite to being able to do everything else. And so we're all activists, even those of us that don't think we're activists or don't do any quote unquote activist work. If you work with this plant, even in an auxiliary business, even if you don't touch the plant, you're an activist by nature of the medium being the message. And it's a fun thing to embrace. Social change, when we create positive social change, is a pretty remarkable thing to be able to look in the mirror and say, wow, I played a part in doing that. It gives your life a lot of meaning, and you can say that there was something more important to you than the rat race.
Yeah. I think the medicine aspect, I was thinking about this earlier today, the fact that there's a lot of, it's almost undisputed now, medical benefits associated with cannabis that, I think if you tried to have that conversation maybe 20 years ago, people might, they would just dismiss you, right away, be like, whatever, that's just what you guys say. I think we really have turned a corner where there's a ton of medical benefits, and, destigmatizing it's still there, obviously, but it's getting better. Maybe
much better. Look at what the children with epilepsy did for CBD and did for legalization in states like Alabama and Georgia and Delaware and places like that. Delaware, it wasn't just epilepsy. There was a young girl named Riley who had a tumor, and she became an activist because CBD and helped her tumor. So she passed a law called Riley's Law, which gives other kids access to cannabis. So that's how we get the stigma down, is the face of cannabis becomes Riley and becomes kids and becomes seniors and becomes, vets with PTSD.
Veterans. Yeah, I was just going to say that.
Yeah. And when that becomes and everybody knows those folks are in the fabric of our society. Everybody has folks in their family that are either veterans or perhaps are suffering from cancer or some other debilitating disease, and everybody knows someone like that. And when we personalize cannabis as wellness, when we frame it as wellness, because I'm in the camp that all use is wellness,
sure,
even if you're trying to quote unquote recreate with cannabis. I think you're still engaging your endocannabinoid system, and there's still wellness benefits that are happening in that scenario. And in fact, it's part of the wisdom of the plant is to use the psychoactivity to get those cannabinoids in our bodies to give us that wellness aspect. So, and I think, it's going to take some time to reduce that stigma to nothing. To this day, people don't want to have a cannabis dispensary in their neighborhood. Why? Stigma. And that's not just California, Michigan, all kinds of places where local people have banned dispensaries. That stigma it's legal. It has nothing to do with the law, right? It's just stigma. So you know, programs like this, the work you're doing right now, it's all, you know, it's like water on a rock. Eventually the rock's not there anymore and the water can flow. And we're in that process now. It took 100 years of lies to build this stigma up.
Yeah. And it takes a while to get that, you know, out. And that, you're right. That is what we try to do here, you know, inform, inspire, and help destigmatize, because, you know, it's like the old saying, we've come so far, but we still got a long ways to go. And back to the stigma topic, like, I don't understand why one side of the aisle hasn't really embraced this issue. You know what I mean? Like, it seems like a winner, because on one side you can say, hey, it's personal freedom, it's entrepreneurship, you know, it's generating revenue. On another side, you know, you could say it's personal freedom. You could say it's, you know, these are things that they like to champion, but yet it seems like the support is kind of tepid, you know, from the Democratic side. And I don't even think the Republicans want to touch it with a 10-foot pole, except for maybe Cory Gardner here. So it's like, you know, it just seems like neither side wants to embrace it. And right now would be a good time where, you know, it creates jobs and revenue and relief for people. And, you know, there's states that can't even meet their budget that probably could use, I think I saw Colorado's, you know, sold like $1 billion worth of cannabis or something. So it's weird. Neither side wants to embrace this. And I think the first one that does is going to get some real legs out of it.
Well, you know, it's, you bring up an excellent analysis and point. Both political parties are terrified of cannabis.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any rational sense to folks like you and me. It doesn't make rational sense to anybody who just takes a look at cannabis from any kind of objective viewpoint at all. It doesn't make any sense. So it makes you wonder what the motives are and why why the two political parties are so terrified of cannabis. And, you know, there's a lot of stigma involved in that we just talked about, but there's also a lot of people that have given these politicians a lot of money over the years.
Bingo.
You know, that have conflicts with cannabis, to say the least. So
yeah, they're beholden to special interests and you know, maybe other industries that are scared of cannabis.
Oh yeah, or haven't quite figured out how to assimilate cannabis. You know, the pharmaceutical industry has no clue on how to assimilate cannabis yet. And it's a pretty big threat if 80% of the medicine that you need in your entire life you can grow in your backyard or your balcony. You know, it's a problem for the pharmaceuticals industry. So you know, there's a follow the money part of this too, I think. And just, we have to transform our entire society from the ground up, and so that something like cannabis, something like a natural remedy, has a place in our pop culture lexicon that is has more respect than right now. You know, right now, if you love plants the way you and I love cannabis, you know, people think you're a little crazy. But then, you know, you see people who love petroleum, you know, or other very toxic things as much.
Fracking. I'm in Colorado, man. There's some people that love fracking.
Yeah,
they are all about it.
As much as you love cannabis, they love fracking, and they love oil, they love petroleum, and you're like, well, it's not that crazy a thing, is it?
Yeah.
And it's just, you know, so if you can love petroleum, you can love weed. We have to make these conversions happen within people and within the whole, you know, society at large. So all these things have to happen. Thankfully, we have this wonderful plant that can make people feel really good and inspired to do that work.
Listen, don't you think if the Republicans and the Democrats right now, and we know they're a mess, I mean, they're a freaking pig pen, but don't you think that if we could just have someone go in and say, okay, listen, here's what we're going to do. you guys are going to smoke this, you guys are going to smoke this, and then we're going to talk about this right now. Don't you think there's just a chance they might find more common ground, as opposed to the way they try to do stuff right now? Like, let's get them stoned, let them smoke the peace pipe, and maybe solve one or two damn things that they seem to not be able
Even
to
if
do
they don't
anything.
solve anything, they could just at least have a common experience. Okay.
Yes.
Oh, we're both stoned.
Yeah.
Wow. What does that feel like to you? Does that feel different to you than me? And you go through this process, right? And so you have a common experience, because we don't even have a common experience of our own country,
Right.
anymore. So I think having common experiences is like, if I'm president, my first 100 days, I'm not going to try to solve the biggest problems facing the country. Can we get rid of the penny? I just want to get rid of the penny on my first. Can we agree on that the penny is something that needs to, all right, we agreed on the penny.
Penny's gone.
Penny's gone. All right, now let's try to get something a little bit more than that done, and then a little bit more, and a little bit more. And I think maybe that kind of approach, because we don't have trust.
Yeah.
And when I've had problems in my own teams that I've had to manage at Harborside and other places, even underground teams,
Mm-hmm.
the trust is really important, right? That you have that trust on the team, and sometimes you don't pay enough attention to it, and things get screwed up, and you have to pay attention to it again. And I think that's a really important part of. And we don't have that in our society anymore. As you mentioned, the two political parties, they just don't have any kind of trust at all. I mean, all these people, millions of people are unemployed, and you couldn't even agree to extend the unemployment last week. It was just unbelievable. The negligence. I mean, if cannabis people were that negligent, they'd string us up. Are you kidding me? They'd string us up in public.
You know what else too is the fact that old people vote traditionally, right? And I know, like, my grandma, she's like 77. She takes CBD and she loves it. And I think that most older people find cannabis either cool or they just don't really think anything of it. You know what I mean? Like, they're not against it. I don't think they think of it as this horrible, drug when they're taking how many pharmaceuticals, I think that it's a win-win. Those people vote, and it's just back to what you said, about the two sides finding something in common ground. I think old people in cannabis would be good common ground, and it might even help, bring them some relief, and maybe they wouldn't need as many pharmaceuticals.
Yeah, cannabis is the common ground. Where we win elections in red states, we win elections in blue states. It is the common ground. It's just that fear and some of those special interests that are holding the two political parties. But the pain, the economic pain, every state in this union is going to have a budget deficit. There might be another Great Depression, and so the conditions for people to take another look at all of this, and I think are ripe. And I think it's all built on lies. Okay. So when you have a real crisis that's not built on a lie, that's punching people in their gut every single day, all day long, it's really hard to say, hey, this cannabis thing's really bad. We can't have it in our community. It's like, what are you talking about? The community bankrupt. Are you insane?
Yeah.
So it becomes really hard for our adversaries to build an argument that makes sense in the theater of public opinion. And I think we'll see a whole lot of embracing of cannabis by political parties in power all throughout the country, and we'll start to see these bans disappear in California and Michigan. Even Colorado had that problem for a while, I know. And we'll start to see more integration, and that'll cause a whole bunch of other problems we'll have to deal with. But at least access won't be as big a problem as it is now in the legal market, where all these people want to access legal cannabis in California and they can't get it.
Yeah.
They can't get it.
Yeah. You know what? Okay, so that's a perfect segue because we've got to take we're going to take a break for a short chronic break here and give a shout out to one of our sponsors. But when we come back, I want to talk to you about the Last Prisoner Project. I want to talk to you about, let's talk about film work. DeAngelo Brothers Productions. I think that stands for DAB. That's pretty cool. And I want to find out what's next for you. But first, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be back right after these messages.
Thank you for listening to Cannabis Tech Talks. This episode is brought to you by Fluence. Fluence creates lighting solutions for controlled environment commercial crop production. This means cannabis cultivators are able to get denser and more potent flower with enriched cannabinoid, terpene, and flavonoid profiles by gaining greater control over your light spectrum and intensity. Fluence applies the latest research in photobiology, evidence-based design, and advanced technology to foster a healthier and more sustainable world.
Hey, everybody, we're back. You are chopping it up with Chuck here on Cannabis Tech Talks, and we are here with Andrew DeAngelo, and we've been talking a little bit about Harborside. We talked somewhat about, kind of his beginnings in the industry. We started talking a little bit about politics and activism. Tell us about the Last Prisoner Project, because I feel like I could talk about that the whole time of this show. Like, I am just absolutely super one of the biggest fans of the LPP. Tell me where that got started and what is Last Prisoner Project all about?
Sure. It's one of my, if not my favorite thing to talk about. Last Prisoner Project is a nonprofit 501c3 and C4 soon. And our mission, Steve and I and some other folks started LPP about a year and a half ago. We officially got our 501c status. I think it was September of 2019. Mm-hmm. And we're not the only group working on getting cannabis people out of prison. We also work on expunging records of cannabis prisoners, and we also work on reintegrating them into society. With COVID-19, we launched some efforts to get people out before they get the virus, especially our long-term cannabis prisoners.
It's life or death for them.
Life or death.
Yeah.
And it's a shame because a lot of these folks are not kids. They're not young people. They're middle-aged folks or even a little bit beyond middle age and very susceptible. When you've been locked up for a long time, people don't understand. You get diabetes because the food's no good. You get arthritis because you don't sleep on padding or any kind of, thing that's good for your bones and muscles and cartilage. Yeah. Certainly, you're going to be more susceptible to stress and anxiety when you're locked up than when you're not locked up. So all these health conditions happen to you when you're locked up for a long time, and that makes your system weaker to COVID. So that's another thing that we do. The community has really responded, particularly since 420. Mm-hmm. LPP has raised probably 50% or more. All the money we've raised has happened since 420. And the murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and many others sort of really motivated folks to help LPP and a whole bunch of other groups, like I said, that are doing this work. And people should help all of them, not just LPP. And so we've been able to hire a few more staff. We've been able to add some more constituents to our roster. There's 40,000 people locked up in the United States for cannabis. We're not quite big enough to help every single one of them, but we try to pay attention to the people in there for life. People have been locked up for decades. And then we also try to pay attention to lower hanging fruit, people that are in states that have more favorable expungement laws and that sort of thing. Nevada just did 15,000 expungements all at once a few weeks ago.
That's cool.
We worked on that with, like I said, a whole bunch of other groups. A lot of this work is done by lawyers, as you can imagine, because clemency is the way people get out of prison, or sometimes it's you win an appeal in the court system. So all those things require lawyers to get people out. And we have a lot of people supporting us on our advisory board, celebrities and all kinds of cannabis brands. And people can go to our website, lastprisonerproject.org. If you're a cannabis company, there's various programs we've developed that you can learn about on their plug and play programs. They're easy to implement. Our staff does 90% of the heavy lifting, and they're good for the companies too. We have logos we can give folks to put in their stores, websites, packaging to let their customers know that they're supporters of LPP. And then those kind of things we've developed to sort of bond the community together in this effort. We hope that we can get everybody out, not just in the United States, but all over the world. I had a great phone call with some folks in Mexico who want to do this work in Mexico, and certainly Canada. We need to do the work up there too. So it's very rewarding work. There's when somebody gets out of prison and you've helped them do that, it's kind of like helping someone heal themselves with cannabis.
Oh, it's got to be so just rewarding to know that your work is helping affect other people that profoundly. I mean, it's got to feel great.
It really does. And folks out there that are listening, there's a lot of exuberance right now in cannabis, right? And but part of what makes me excited about being in cannabis is getting people out of prison and helping people with cancer and epilepsy and debilitating diseases. That's where the real fun is. Yes, it's great to have a business that's robust, that does well, that makes money, and few cannabis businesses do right now. But the bigger mission is really to serve our community.
Yeah.
And
Legacy. What kind of legacy are you going to leave? You know, I mean, buildings come and go and businesses can come and go, but if you can affect somebody's life, and the people listening right now, they can get involved. Just like you said, they can go to the website, they can donate, they can, you know, where I first heard of Last Prisoner Project?
Where?
I was at the Emerald conference in San Diego, and I believe you guys had a golf tournament there and raised something like, you know, $14,000. And I saw this big giant check being given, you know, to the LPP. And I was curious, you know, what exactly are they doing? And, you know, you guys have been great. You know, you're actually, the Last Prisoner Project is, you know, one of our social impact partners for the Emerge Virtual Cannabis Conference. And I mean, Mary, just your whole team has been incredible, and it just inspires us to do more to help you guys continue. So I hope people that are listening, you know, they check it out, because it's good to have a couple, I think, charities or nonprofits, you know, that you really vibe with, so that you can feel you're a part of that change. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. I think everybody should have some kind of community service bucket in their lives, even if it's just writing a check once a year. But I encourage people to embed in the community to do that service. And you know, there's nothing like, even if you just write a letter to a prisoner and start a pen pal relationship with a prisoner. I have a couple going right now myself. Super rewarding thing to do, because when you're in prison and you get a letter from somebody, it's really hard to imagine what that means. But when you're locked up and somebody has taken the time to write you a letter, that's a lifeline for you. Just that emotional and spiritual connection with another human being on the outside is just, I cannot state enough just how powerful that is. And it's a great way for people that don't want to be public, maybe want to be a little more discreet or private. You can just start a little pen pal relationship with a prisoner, and you don't have to get a bunch of glory, and you don't have to spend any money just to stand. And that can do a lot, because we have so much to repair with the war on cannabis, and particularly people of color and poor people that have been locked up for this. And we all need to have that part of our lives that we spend a little time on that. If we all did that, if every single person did that, then we'd have this job done pretty quick. So I think it's the way of the future. I think the last several weeks with what we've seen in the streets is teaching all of us that. So I'm hoping that everybody will include that in their lives moving forward.
I think I heard it might have been, maybe Tony Robbins or someone. He said that the ultimate definition of, failure is financial success without fulfillment. That element of fulfillment is what really makes it, that you're giving back. And I think that's really cool. I mean, can the cannabis industry really have success without addressing, social equity and what it took to get to this point?
No, we can't. And it won't be an authentic success if there's people making intergenerational wealth while there's other poor Black and brown people locked up for decades for doing much, much less.
Yeah.
Same thing on a much smaller scale, and they simply didn't have the privilege to overcome the obstacles, and they're still locked up. So no, we will not be. It's a sacred mission. I call it a sacred mission to right the wrongs of the past. We have a sacred mission. It's not a mission to any transactional God. It's a mission to the moral center of the universe.
Yeah.
And we all know that there is a moral center of the universe. We all feel it. And that's our obligation, is to that, which is way bigger than any one person or any one company or any one thing. And until we fulfill that destiny and we fulfilled that sacred promise to correct the wrongs of the past, then we have not fulfilled the promise of cannabis legalization and the cannabis renaissance. I am hopeful but not optimistic, actually, that we're on our way to doing that. So we have to work really hard.
You are an activist. I love it. I'm digging it. Okay, so tell us about film work. What's the DeAngelo Brothers Productions? What's going on your creative side here?
Well, thanks for asking. Creativity. When I went to college, I studied acting, filmmaking, and theater 30 years ago now. And so storytelling has always been, we mentioned stigma a moment ago. That's how you reduce stigma. That's how you open people's hearts to cannabis. We don't change going through the head, we change going through the heart. And my creative work has always been designed to try to touch people in their hearts so that we can, again, transform society. I've always been hungry to transform society my whole life.
It's a worthy goal. I mean, that's a pretty aspirational.
1985 and you love cannabis and Ronald Reagan's president, and you realize you're a progressive person, and then there was a lot to do. So there was a whole lot of work we had to do there, and I thought, storytelling was a safe place to do that work.
Yeah.
So now that I've had this long journey as a cannabis trader and as a cannabis activist, and Harborside's gone public, and we have this Last Prisoner project, I'm also trying to tell stories to reduce that stigma. So I have a couple feature films that I produced this year. One's dropping next month called CBD Nation. That's a documentary film. I have two columns with Playboy.com right now where I'm writing about cannabis on their platform. And me and my brother have a bunch of other creative projects in our pipeline. And, we've been working together since we were kids, and we're going to work together until we're in our graves, and maybe even into the next lifetimes as well. So DeAngelo Brothers Productions is sort of the entity we use for those kinds of creative projects. CBD Nation, Steve and I both appear in that documentary, and we produced it. The production company was one of the producers on it. And, it's something I've always had a passion for. Storytelling is one of it's kind of like social justice work. It's something you do because you love to do it. It's not something I've been able to make a lot of money on in my life, but it is something that has been an important part of my career, an important part of my work. And I'm happy to continue to tell those stories. I'm hoping that we'll be able to announce some more creative projects in 2020 before the year's out.
Well, I think what's so cool about that is that right now there's a big push towards, what they call like edutainment. It's kind of disguised as entertainment, but you're learning stuff along the way. And I think that people that are, consuming on Netflix and Hulu and they're binging, they just start looking around, and next thing you know, you stumble on a documentary or you stumble on a movie, and it's a lot of those movies back in the 90s, movies like Friday or Pineapple Express, the 2000s or whatever. I watch those now, and they were a little ahead of their time in a way, because back then it was illegal everywhere, and maybe some of those movies helped a little bit soften the stigma, as we moved on longer, just seeing it in pop culture, reading about it in Playboy, you know what I mean? Like just
Oh
seeing
yeah.
it kind of helps, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Up in Smoke, the
Yeah.
first song movie, that was the pioneering,
Yeah.
piece of cannabis content that was a big giant hit, right?
Ultimate buddy comedy, you know what I mean? Cannabis, it was super benign, fun.
Yeah, and there were parts of it that one can say, well, they were a little bit too far on the intoxication side, but that way it was a comedy. It was supposed to be funny,
Yeah.
and people, and I was a kid when that movie hit, and it was you felt a real sense of freedom
Yeah.
going to the movies and being able to see something like that. You're sitting there going, how did they get the money? How did somebody give them the money to make this movie? How did they do it? My God, this is terrific. And it's like reading Hunter S. Thompson when you read Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, or at least when I read it as a teenager. It was just one of those, yes, yes,
Yeah.
oh, there's somebody else who feels this way and thinks this way and is as big a freak and hedonist as I am. And awesome.
I'm okay. I'm all right.
So it's really important, and that's that. I always, harbored dreams of being able to tell a story that really impacted. Weed Wars, our reality TV show about Harborside. It had a big impact on people, and people to this day come up to me and say, "Wow, Weed Wars is the reason I'm in the cannabis industry." And
That's cool.
that's a cool
Yeah.
story. I mean, even Weed Wars had lots of problems and issues as a story, and we were dealing with a big media company, and there were a lot of compromises you had to make and to have a platform like that. But
We would love to have you anytime on Cannabis and Tech Today. We've got a really nice, print magazine. It goes out all over, and we'd love to have you contribute sometime. I feel like I could talk to you, forever. This has been a really good chat. What's next for you? What's kind of on the horizon? Is it the creating? Is it what
well,
is it for you?
creativity for sure, social justice for sure,
Mhm.
but the other thing I'm in my post Harborside life now that I'm doing is strategic advice and consulting to cannabis industry, and also even governments and
Yeah.
cities and people like
You've
that.
seen it.
Yeah,
You've been a part of it. You've helped create it literally from the ground up, where you guys didn't even really have a blueprint, right? And you got to experience the things that worked, the things that didn't work. I mean, that's valuable information right there, my friend.
right. And what's fun about it is I get to help a lot of different companies. We get to build the industry instead of just building one company.
Hmm.
I had my head down with running the day-to-day for Harborside for many, many years, over a decade, and that job required a lot of focus. It required me to really be embedded with the team. I had, at one point, almost 300 people in one way or another reporting to me. So now I get to do that with lots of different companies, and Steve and I, just as you and I have talked about, Chuck, we want to build a new kind of industry, not the same as all the other industries, not a brutal, greedy race to the bottom. We want something more meaningful in our ecosystem. We want to be able to create models and integrate cannabis in society so that society feels really good about it, and that it's not all about the money, but it's also about building community and making people well, and giving people some hope right now, and some relief, and some soothing energy, and that's the promise that cannabis has, and that's the great work that we all are privileged enough to do, really.
Yeah. It's like you said, where we have right now before us this incredible opportunity. It's our sandbox, and it might sound utopian, but you can make money and make a difference. You can help people and be profitable, and I just love the fact that we're trying to do it. We're at least willing to take a look at how we're doing it and have the conversation, amongst ourselves in the industry. That's a damn good first start.
I couldn't agree more, Chuck. And if you look at the institutions, good democratic institutions in this country, a lot of them were built from the profits of bad things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Things that are, we were not super proud of right now, but profits, can be used for good things. Rockefeller polluted the world, but they also spent a lot of money on the arts and other things that were good. So this idea of, using profits to create good things is certainly not anything new. And the question in front of humanity is, can we do it sustainably?
Yeah.
Can we do it sustainably? Cannabis hemp is going to play a huge role in answering that question. I think we can do it sustainably, and I think not only sustainably, but maybe even in a better way, and we can build an even better world. It may not be, it may not have as much zeros behind it, but I think there might be a lot more meaning and happiness in a world that we create like that, because I think people are hungry for that right now. Certainly we're all suffering in this moment where some whole bunch of things have gone wrong, and we have to take stock of that and get better.
I think authenticity. I think people are starving for authenticity, right now. And it's just, there's so much fake, there's so much, just a lot of, Instagram filters, and just things aren't real. And I think authenticity carries a lot of weight, right now, especially if you're being authentic and trying to do the right thing.
Well said, Chuck.
Yeah. There you go. Hey, how can our listeners get a hold of you? What's your preferred social media platform? Where are you hanging out? How can they get a hold of you?
I'm the easiest guy in the world to get a hold of. Andrew DeAngelo is my website. You can email me there. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Twitter. Pretty easy guy to get a hold of. Andrew at andrewdeangelo.com is probably the easiest. And anybody who wants to plug in the Last Prisoner Project, lastprisonerproject.org.
That's so awesome. Well, thank you so much for being a guest. Let's do it again sometime. Really just a big fan of the work of you, your brother, the LPP, just everything that's going on over there right now. We really appreciate you. And for our listeners right now, we'll be back next Wednesday with another brand new episode. If you like this episode, make sure that you subscribe and share. And don't forget to follow us and follow Andrew and follow the Last Prisoner Project on social. Also, don't forget, check out Emerge Virtual Cannabis Conference. It's going to be kicking off in September. It is on a 3D immersive world where you create an avatar, you go around. Last Prisoner Project, Minorities for Medical Marijuana. Those are our two social impact partners. It's going to be really cool. So make sure you check it out. And again, we appreciate you joining us. We'll see you again next Wednesday. Take care. Until next time.
Thanks, Chuck.